to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon right across from me.
What's up?
It is Tuesday, July 9th. In just around 2 weeks, I'm going off the New England Patriots training camp starting on the 25th. In just around 2 or maybe 2.5 weeks, we get training camp. Camp.
Then we can watch training
excited.
camp and preseason for.
I didn't realize training camp's only like a week or two.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the first preseason game is August 1st.
Okay, so I guess there's legitimate reason to get hyped then.
Yeah.
I thought training camp was like a month long.
No. That's what I thought too. I was like,
Yeah.
I was getting excited beginning of July training camp, but they got it off until the end of the month. Training camp starts the end of July. Preseason starts in August. And August, my friends, is draft month.
Uh-oh.
Draft month. Our draft will probably be in September.
You know what people should start doing? You know how like really rich people
Yeah.
don't have a birthday, they have a birth month?
Oh, God.
Draft month. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, there you go. Today we are going to bring you our forgotten wide receivers for from the 2018 season, or maybe before that. Maybe they were relevant a year before.
Yeah, they were good ones.
Yeah, they were good ones. So we're going to talk about forgotten wide receivers. But first, let's get into the news. Before we do, though, be sure to go over to Twitter and follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs. Go to Instagram at the Fantasy Champions and follow us on Instagram. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. Subscribe wherever you listen: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. On YouTube, make sure you click the bell. Leave a review wherever you listen. Please leave a review. Please leave a review.
I was going to say, even if it's like, wow, that one kid, he called himself
ugly.
Morgan.
He's ugly. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends.
I would like the podcast. You guys give good information, but I just can't look at his face.
Oh, God. Let's get into the news. So there's some news this week, not a lot. You however, thought it was a large sum of news.
Yeah, 9 news stories. It's not, dude. That's like nothing.
Maybe we should fire
I'm saying
our curator of the news.
Yeah, that's what
myself. Let's start off with Ezekiel Elliott. The day after we recorded our Tuesday podcast, it was reported that Elliott was not going to get a suspension after he had an altercation with a security guard. If he got suspended for that, I would have probably laughed and cried a little bit.
He laughed and cried at the same time.
Yeah, I would have. Yeah, because I'm number 2 in our draft.
Oh, true. So
yeah.
you're probably gonna get him.
I would get toasted.
You know what he probably did?
What's that?
He probably was going to get suspended, and then he offered Roger Goodell a lifetime supply of Chick-fil-A.
There you go. That's ridiculous. The Buffalo News believes that third-round tight end Dawson Knox has a chance to start Week 1. I put that in there because there's literally no other tight ends on the Buffalo Bills, and they did like to throw it when healthy to, what's his name, Charles Clay.
Yeah.
So, not that I think the rookie tight end Dawson Knox is going to do anything next year, but it's an interesting situation to keep your eye on, because if Josh Allen does start dumping it off to the tight end a lot, like he did with Charles Clay, at least when he was on the field, then you're probably going to have a situation where the tight end in Buffalo is relatively decent. The Athletic's Vic Tafur, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, but he is reporting that there is a growing sentiment that Josh Jacobs will not be at training camp when rookies report on July 23rd. Apparently, Josh Jacobs is upset with
the
timing of his guaranteed money check coming in. So that's what him and his agent are discussing. Because the contract's already set. It's really just...
That seems like a very
stupid
Oakland Raider type start to your career.
Yeah, it kind of does. I think it's funny, though. Like, you're arguing about when you're going to get your millions. And I'm like, why don't you just be patient, bro? Who cares when you get your guaranteed money?
That's easy for us to say.
You're going to get it eventually.
We never get
that's
it.
True. So I guess that's the hang up. But if they say he might not report until late in camp. This is not the first time that this has happened. There was a defensive guy last year, forgot his name though. He had problems all the way up until like 1 week until the season started. Yeah, rookie linebacker. He was like top 5 in the draft. I can't remember his name though.
Oh, I remember what you're talking about.
Anyway, so Josh Jacobs may not report. That's a situation to keep your eye on, because if he's not playing in preseason games,
it's not going
to be a good situation for all the people drafting him in the 4th round. That's kind of a little bit concerning.
Oh boy.
Josh Allen refers to Cole. He was asked about Cole Beasley and how he's doing in OTAs and training camp and everything that's going on with the Bills. And he referred to Cole Beasley as his safety valve, which is a weird way of putting it. But it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective of, like, just a little window into who Josh Allen might be throwing to. If he does use Cole Beasley as his safety valve, there could be, like, Tom Brady's safety valve is Julian Edelman or James White. If he does refer to that, if he does refer to Cole Beasley as a safety valve, and he uses him in that way, Cole Beasley could be an interesting player.
Especially PPR leagues.
But Josh Allen's not really known for his NFL arm, so he's got a good arm.
He's got a really good arm.
He's talented, but he makes poor decision making.
Yeah.
Poor decisions. So we'll keep that Cole Beasley thing on the back burner until... because I don't even think I have him on my rankings.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
I don't think a lot of people have him on his rankings.
Julio Jones Julio Jones said he won't hold out for a new contract, which is good news if you're a Julio Jones lover like myself. Juju Smith-Schuster believes James Washington will sneak up on people this year. So everyone has been talking about Donta Moncrief for 3-4 weeks. And now this news comes out about James Washington, and he continues to be one of my sleepers, because I think he was supposed to be the Juju.
Right.
Like, I think he was a 2nd or 3rd round wide receiver. His player comp is freaking Antonio Brown. Like, he's the same size, height, and measurables as Antonio Brown. Yeah. So that's literally playerprofiler.com has his player comp as Antonio Brown. So if he's talented enough to jump into that Juju role, we might see some of that
for sure
to fruition. I'm just not
one of
sure
those guys I think is going to legitimately take off, though. Whether
Juju.
It's Washington or...
It's Juju.
Well, when I say, like, take off, I mean, like, one of them, not Juju. Like, he's going to play
Donta Moncrief and James Washington.
Right. One of those two guys are going to be, like, legit fantasy options next year, I think.
Usually every year there's one... or not just one, there's like 2, 3, or 4 wide receiver threes that make the leap into that, not necessarily a starting role, but take the leap into wide receiver 2 territory.
Yeah.
You saw guys like Christian Kirk, Tyler Boyd last year do that very thing. So even John Ross, to some extent, when he was with the Bengals over the second half of the year, he wasn't a wide receiver 2, but he was putting up wide receiver 2 numbers when AJ Green was not on the field. So you could see that happen with James Washington. I still think he's a sleeper. I just don't draft him in the 15th round and expect him to come out week 1 and produce right away. And everyone's like, "Oh, what were you saying, fantasy champions? You suck." We didn't tell you to draft James Washington.
That's so going to happen too. Something true. Like that.
That's true.
It's like, hey, this guy's kind of a good sleeper. Someone takes him like the 3rd round. You're like, oh, I saw on your podcast, like, he's supposed to be like really good.
Yeah, no. It's like Ravens tight end Mark Andrews could be featured target in the Ravens offense, according to the team's website. The team's website really isn't a great source for information, but if Mark Andrews, a lot of people I've seen when I scroll through my Twitter feeds, there's a lot of hype surrounding Mark Andrews in the fantasy football community. I'm not really hyped on Mark Andrews, more specifically because it's an offense that probably won't reach 3,000 passing yards this year. If that's the case, like, yes, Mark Andrews is going to come out and be a beast. I'm sorry, I'm not really going to take that take. If Lamar Jackson comes out and is a complete beast for like 5 weeks,
I'm a Lamar Jackson guy.
Yeah,
and I'm still not a Lamar Andrews guy. Yeah.
Mass Live. Oh, this is interesting. and I'm gonna live and die by the ship.
I just saw this on Instagram.
Mass Lives. Andrew Callahan reports that Rob Gronkowski is participating in private workouts with Tom Brady.
Yeah, somebody took a picture on Instagram and was like with Tom Brady.
Lots of news surrounding Gronk, specifically because somebody interviewed him last week and said they basically asked him. They were like, "So, is there any chance you come back?" And he was like, "I'm enjoying my life right now. I don't really want to, in this Gronky way.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying my life right now. I'm not really worried about that." And he's like, "Who knows? Maybe when it gets around September and October."
Didn't he say that though? Like when he retired?
Yeah.
Or his agent or someone
People
like that.
are continually believing that he would come back halfway through the season.
It's probably just because it's Gronk. It's like he probably just retired, so he doesn't have to partake in like training
OTA,
camp. And,
not be
OTA,
forced by Bill
right.
to do anything.
So he retired, but
we'll see what happens with Rob Gronkowski, but I'm gonna live on that ship and die in it. So we'll keep tabs on that. The Charlotte Observer, Brendan Marks. I've never heard of any of these people, by the way. Writes, Cam Newton is slated to be a full participant when training camp opens. This is great news. We'll talk about Cam Newton later today, but it sounds like his shoulder is back to normal, so that is a good start. A lot of people are really nervous about
including me.
DJ Moore and Curtis Samuels affects the season more specifically because of Cam Newton and whether he can throw or not. Regardless of whatever, like Cam Newton has thrown 4,000 yards one time in his career.
Right.
So I'm not really concerned about him being able to throw the football and be a successful fantasy quarterback. But we'll get to that later. Jamison Crowder has been impressive this offseason and has looked fully healthy. I threw this in here because this is another, you saw the Cole Beasley report for Josh Allen. Now you're seeing the Jamison Crowder for Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that situation with Jamison Crowder. I'm not saying Jamison Crowder is going to be good, but just you got
Dude, what you just said on the podcast, Jamison Crowder is going to be
draft Jamison Crowder with your second overall pick right
Listen,
now.
if you're sitting there for number 1 overall, there's only 2 options. It's Jimmy Garoppolo or Jamison Crowder.
Jimmy Garoppolo, Jamison Crowder.
If you want to go Mahomes there, I'm not going to judge you for that.
Yeah. Our last bit of news, I just got this like an hour ago. Courtland Sutton is reported to be the starting wide receiver by week 1. I kind of want him to be a sleeper on my board, but I just don't feel it. I like Courtland Sutton. I liked him last year, but there's just
you loved him last year.
Yeah, I did. There's something about the wide receiver situation in Denver that really doesn't like. Emmanuel Sanders, by the way, was a impressive wide receiver one. I'm sorry, we're not going to talk about Cam Newton on this show. Forgive me. We're talking about wide receivers, not quarterbacks. But anyway, so Courtland Sutton, I like him as a player, but last year when I saw him play, he can only do one thing, and that's stretch the field.
Yeah,
vertically.
But isn't that a good thing considering who his quarterback is?
Joe Flacco? Yeah, I guess so. Very good point there, brother.
Just saying.
Let's get started with our top forgotten wide receivers from 2018. We want to talk about these players that played well maybe in 2017, 2018, but they're not getting a good rap this year. They're getting drafted later, and they're being forgotten about.
People kind of forgot they were good, essentially.
Yeah. Let's start with the number 1 guy on our list, and this is the first guy that popped into my mind, and I think the same thing for you when we were talking about forgotten wide receivers, and that's AJ Green.
Yep.
I love AJ Green, and there's I have this little sour feeling in my chest about AJ Green and how effective he's going to be as a wide receiver.
Because I think you roasted me.
I did roast you a little bit.
When I took him in our mock draft.
I did. He makes me a little nervous, and it's because of his foot injuries. This past year, it wasn't an Achilles. I don't think it was an Achilles. I can't remember.
No, I don't remember what it was either.
Usually, foot and ankle injuries are not very good for wide receivers.
Yeah.
Especially because most of what they do is running. So, AJ Green, it's a little concerning that he got that foot injury, but a lot of people forget over the first 7-8 weeks of the season when he was actually playing and he was starting, I think he was the wide receiver 6.
I was going to say, I think he was top 5.
Yeah, somewhere around that. I mean, 5 or 6, who cares? Like, you're getting a wide receiver
legit.
1. I drafted him in the second round. I ended up trading him away. I think it was for Antonio Brown, but
Wow, lucked out of that one.
Yeah,
You?
lucked. 2 weeks later, he got injured.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But anyway, so in AJ Green, the reason why I think he's forgotten about is more specifically, people are nervous about the injury.
As they should be, I think.
As they should be. And he's in a new offense.
Right.
And so you have those two situations that you kind of need to look out for. But I do think that there's the talent there. You know what I mean? You have a quarterback that he's worked with. Apparently the guy that they drafted doesn't even look NFL ready right now, is what I've been reading. He looks like they always talk about after the draft when guys get in there for OTAs and training camp.
Yeah.
The second you see them on the field, you know if it was a good pick or not. Like, scouts talk about that all the time. The second you get them with the team, playing with their unit, you see if they actually know the offense.
It doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work. And some guys, well, yeah. But like the second they step on the field, you just look at a guy and you go, oh no, why did we draft that guy?
Right.
That's like, I heard so many people say that. And some people are saying that about their backup quarterback that they just drafted, whose name escapes me. But so it doesn't sound like he's going to jump in and steal the job. Andy Dalton is the starting quarterback. He has a good repertoire with AJ Green.
Yep.
So I think that if you can rely on that, he's going to be good. The value of him is I think his floor is mid-range wide receiver 2, and I think his ceiling is jumping into that mid-range wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
And I think that to get a guy like that with the ceiling of jumping into a wide receiver 1, like there's a good chance that he could end up as a wide receiver 1 next year. So to get him in the third round is
fourth round,
is huge.
A lot of drafts,
yeah,
actually.
Sometimes fourth round. So I think he's being forgotten about. I think people are, pushing him aside and wanting to draft guys like Juju and Antonio Brown. I think he's going as the 9th wide receiver off the board or something like that.
He is currently going as the 12th.
12th. Wow.
Yep.
All right.
So yeah, that's kind of like, I agree with a lot of what you said. He is going in late 3rd round, early 4th round, which for a guy who is probably a WR1 when healthy is a major steal, because people are like looking at last year and they're like, well, Adam Thielen had a really good year. People still love Keenan Allen. People love T.Y. Hilton. Like, there's a lot of guys in that range that I don't know about you, but I'd probably take AJ Green over all those guys.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, injury is a big concern, but you could say that about a lot of guys in this league.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one thing we say about every single player in fantasy. Well, if he gets hurt, well, yeah. Now, AJ Green's chances of getting hurt are obviously higher, which, again, concerning. But
I think it's more of the bounce back from the injury.
He's had injuries before, though.
Yeah.
Where he's been able to bounce back. So, I mean, I get the concern. Trust me, I do. But you're still, like, it's still AJ Green.
Yeah.
Like, let's not pretend he wasn't an elite wide receiver.
Yeah.
So,
it was a toe injury.
Sorry, what was it again?
A toe injury.
What was it?
A toe injury that required surgery. Yeah,
I'm going to
say he'll be fine.
If a toe injury is the reason you're not drafting AJ Green, thank you. I'll take him.
Right. I think the only, like I said, injury is always a concern. I think the one thing that I've noticed this year in particular, and most years this is the case, but this year in particular, is that a lot of people are avoiding injury-prone guys in the first 2 rounds.
Yep.
And so you look at, wide receivers like AJ Green. You look at running backs like Devonta Freeman, yeah. So you look at guys like that, and people or Leonard Fournette too. They're avoiding them in the top 2 rounds just because of injury concern.
Yeah.
You're seeing Todd Gurley now fall in late 2nd, early 3rd round just because of an arthritis in his knee, and it's like you get these reports and people get all like wound up about stuff like this, and then you end up getting this is what wins people like us fantasy leagues, guys, honest to God, like you people leaving AJ Green on the board. And so I mean, AJ Green could flop this year. Tyler Boyd is in that situation.
Yeah,
they might go to him, but when I look at the new head coach coming out of Sean McVay's system, and you look at the consistency of the wide receivers that the Los Angeles Rams had,
it's a good point. I
see AJ Green and Tyler Boyd being able to produce as at least wide receiver 2s.
Yeah.
One of them is going to jump into the wide receiver 1 territory, and it's a question of whether it's AJ Green and Tyler Boyd. And if I had to put my money on a guy,
it'd be AJ
it'd
Green.
be AJ
right?
Green.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take AJ Green here, and I'm going to hold on to him. But I think people, I don't know. I don't know why.
So do you want to take back your mean?
I'll take back my mean takes about
him.
AJ Green. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Number 2 on our list is Stefan Diggs. Now, this is an interesting one because I thought about this for a little bit. I was like, should we put Stefan Diggs on this list? And then I said yes.
Because you love Diggs.
Because I love Diggs. He's getting drafted. He finished as in half PPR. I think it was in standard, he finished as a wide receiver 2. In half PPR, he finished as 10. And I think in full PPR, he was like 9.
Okay.
Where he finished last year, that is. He's getting drafted right now in the 4th round is like the 20th something wide receiver. And to me, he didn't take any leap and he didn't regress at all. Like, he got drafted in the 4th round last year. He's getting drafted in the 4th round this year. And like, to me, I feel like he should have taken, and maybe he will over the next month or so before people really start drafting. Mock drafts are going to kick up real hard at the end of this month, but because the second people start seeing training camp, they're like, we need to start preparing.
Oh yeah,
and then
that's
it's like,
the go-to.
Boom. So anyway, Stefan Diggs, though, I think people are starting to forget the quality receiver that Stefan Diggs is. He is one of those guys that he's consistently a wide receiver 2, always stays in that range of 10 to 14. With the upside of a wide receiver, like a high-end wide receiver 1. And I think that's what people have been waiting on. But if you're getting a wide receiver 2 in the process, that's not a problem. In some mock drafts, I've been getting Stefan Diggs in the 5th round. So I could reasonably
he does fall.
In the 2nd round, get a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, and in the 5th round, get a guy like 4th or 5th round, get a guy like Stefan Diggs, and all of a sudden my wide receiver core works out. That's 2 wide receiver 1s sitting right there. Yeah. So for me, especially if you look at the second half of the year, Kirk Cousins started throwing it to Stefan Diggs a lot more than he was Adam Thielen.
That's where I'd kind of make my point is people would argue that Adam Thielen is the guy there. Why even bother taking Stefan Diggs?
Yeah.
But if you do look at the second half of the year, Diggs became the number 1 guy as the year went on. And Cousins loved to go to Diggs the more the year went on. And you listen to some analysts, they were saying like Stefan Diggs is the actual WR1 with the Vikings.
Right.
And now going into this year, it's like people forgot about that because Thielen did have an excellent year.
Right.
And an excellent start to last year. But it was really Stefan Diggs through the second half of the year that was the guy. And people have just completely forgot about that. And now he's back to where he was in the beginning of last year.
Yeah.
As you were saying. So I do like Diggs, but not as much as you.
I think I'm trying to find the numbers between week 10 and I think it was 10 and 17 or 9 and 17.
Thielen had, it was like the first, I want to say 9 weeks of the year for Thielen, so try week 10 to...
Yeah, 10 to 17.
Yeah.
I think, 10 to 17, he was... Where are you?
I want to say he was like top like 5 or 6.
Yeah, he was 15 from 10 to 17, so I think that was during the... Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, I tried.
Wait, is that half PPR? Because I'm looking this up now. Probably should
That's
have
standard.
Advance.
Forgive me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Stefan Diggs, he was 14 from 12 to 17 and half PPR. I think the big thing for me is that the target share increased for Stefan Diggs in the second half of the year. When you look over the course of the season, the start of the season, he was actually relatively decent. He had a couple of really good games, Stefan Diggs.
But he wasn't
the main receiver. Like Adam Thielen on a consistent basis was the number 1 guy. And so over the course of, I think it was the first 9 weeks, he had 6 targets, 13 targets, 10 targets, 15 targets, 11 targets, 5 targets, 14 targets, 11 targets, and then they went on the bye week, and after that it was 18, 11, 5, 6, 7, 6, and 10. So it doesn't look like they passed the ball all that much towards the end of the season, but Stefan Diggs was producing. So for me, when I look at Diggs, I think people are forgetting how effective he actually is as a wide receiver. And I think that there are going to be people who regret that. And I'm not saying you should draft Stefon Diggs in the second or third round. Draft him exactly where he is because that's his value. But I think that you could possibly get a low-end wide receiver 1 next year at a 4th or 5th round value. That's really good for your team. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm trying to look at these numbers too, because maybe it's further back. Because I do remember Diggs was higher on that list.
Right.
Let's try weeks, maybe 8.
I think it was that stretch of games from 7 till like week 11.
He did move up when I went down. Hold on.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
He's like, we're getting there. Because when you look at his half PPR fantasy points over the course of week 7 to 12, he had 27 in week 8. Week 11, he had 31. Week 12, he had 22.
Right, yeah.
And then he had a 21 and a 23-point game early in the season.
You can't really go for the up to week 16 or week 17 either, because didn't Kirk Cousins? I don't know if he played, but even if he did, the whole offense fell apart.
Yeah.
The last 3 weeks of the season.
Right.
But it was really just the overall second half of the year where he kind of jumped up.
Yeah, I think he's, like I said, he's a very valuable asset to get late in drafts. Let's move on to the next guy, Alshon Jeffrey. This is also an interesting one.
Yeah.
It's a little deeper, but Alshon Jeffrey is a very talented receiver. I believe he struggled with some injuries last year, so he wasn't as good at
wide receiver.
I wasn't trying to say wide receiver. I was trying to say he didn't produce as much. But that's not how it came out. But Alshon Jeffrey just didn't produce the way that he needed to last season. And I think a majority of that is specifically because our man's Carson Wentz was not on the field.
Right. That's people kind of forget
Carson
about
Wentz came back week 4, right? Because Alshon Jeffrey didn't play until week 4 either.
I don't know what week he came back. Actually, I have to look it up again.
But over the course of those, when Carson Wentz didn't fall off a cliff.
Well, that's the thing
weeks
too.
4, 5, 6, and 7, he had 24 fantasy points, 5 fantasy points, 28 and 21 fantasy points. And then the rest of the season, he was just mediocre. But over the course of the last 4 weeks, week 14, 15, 16, and 17, he had 17, 24, 11, and 16. So when you look at those numbers, that's not bad production from Alshon Jeffrey. His problem is that you just have to have, he needs a consistent quarterback on a week-to-week basis in order to succeed. And so I think when you look at the course of those 4 weeks, where he was just absolutely going
Which
off.
weeks
he finished
those weeks, by the way? Sorry.
14 through 17. He was wide receiver 10 and 58 fantasy points over the course of those weeks. So
that was actually Nick Foles.
Yeah, under Nick Foles.
Yes.
So he improved when he had consistency and not a quarterback with a broken back.
That is true. But I mean, the whole Eagles offense had it down year last year.
Yeah. It hurt. It actually hurt him when they brought in Golden Tate.
The
whole
that
offense.
is true. Yes,
the whole
the
offense,
Golden Tate trade.
Not Alshon Jeffrey specifically, but the whole offense.
Now, could you make the argument though that Deshaun Jackson, bringing in Deshaun Jackson will hurt them too?
No, because I think Golden Tate was just bad, and they started trying to force him the ball. Honest to God, they started to try to force Golden Tate the ball, and
You're like, nah, dude.
Yeah.
I think Golden Tate just sucks.
It'll to be honest with you, Deshaun Jackson will probably, because of the way Deshaun Jackson plays, it'll probably open up the offense a lot more for a guy like Alshon Jeffrey to succeed.
Right. He's kind of, I get what you're saying, the deep threat sort of guy who just runs vertical. And,
Right.
Yeah.
So you saw over the last 4 weeks, he was a wide receiver 10, and he probably next year could be a wide receiver 2. And I don't even know what round he's going in, but he's a player. He's a player that people are forgetting about. They're sleeping on. They're forgetting about, and they forget how good he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's the 30th receiver off the board right now. You know who's a slot higher than him though?
Who's that?
Robbie Anderson. Your guy.
Yeah. So if you have the choice between Alshon Jeffrey and Robbie Anderson, I'll take Rob. I'll take.
Oh yeah.
I almost said Robbie Anderson. I'll take Alshon Jeffrey. Sorry.
I think your true colors just came out. Actually,
it's true. It's absolutely true.
You're a Robbie Anderson fan.
But yeah, Jeffrey, definitely a guy people are forgetting about in the drafts this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think if he's on the board, I mean, why not? You know what I mean?
I think I'm a big fan of.
What round is that?
7th.
7th round. I mean, that's you don't have a
lot of receivers go off the board though right before him, so it's kind of like an inflated 7th. But
so if you have Alshon Jeffrey on the board, I definitely would consider taking him in the 7th round. There are guys that I'm looking at ahead of him.
Like Tyler Boyd and DJ Moore.
Yeah,
they're ranked ahead of him. They're going in the 6th round now. They're jumping every day. The mock drafts and the ADP is like evolving throughout the week. So
yeah, I try to do like 4 mock drafts a week, and I haven't done one in a couple days, and it changed.
Wow, 4 a week.
It changed completely. Let's go on to our 4th wide receiver, Cooper Kupp.
My dude.
Cooper Kupp was before his ACL injury. Maybe one of the best. He was one of the best slot receivers in the NFL, and I can't remember what week he got injured. Was it?
I want to say earlier than that. Actually, week 9 sounds about right.
Maybe it was week 5.
No, it wasn't that early. He had like half the season where he was like a top 10 fantasy wide receiver.
So let me just look that up.
I mean, for me, Cooper Kupp, you're taking him. I think 5th round right now.
Yeah.
Or 6th round, actually, which is starting to push it. Right now, currently, as we stand, again, it changes week to week, but he's the 3rd Rams receiver off the board. He's Jared Goff's security blanket. I think, personally, he's going to be the number 1 receiver for the Rams this year, fantasy-wise. Right. Especially in full PPR leagues and even half PPR leagues, I think he's the go-to guy. He's going to get the catches. He's going to get the yards. And touchdowns, I think, is going to be pretty spread out between those 3 guys. So Cooper Kupp to me gets the edge over those guys. And people, they look at Brandon Cooks, who's probably the biggest name. And then they see Robert Woods, what he did at the end of the year. And what he did really throughout the whole year. He had a good season. But Cooper Kupp, when he was on the field, Jared Goff has said many times, like, when he's getting pressured and when he's in trouble, he looks Cooper Kupp's way. That's a sign, as we were talking about earlier, kind of like the security blanket.
Yeah.
Huge plus sign for a guy when you're competing against other receivers in a system or in fantasy.
Over the first 5 weeks of the season, as it was a giant shuffle in week 6, he had weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 where he played, and then he was hurt for a couple of weeks, missed weeks 7 and 8, and then came back 9 and 10, and that's when he tore his ACL. So over the course of the time that he was starting on the field, he was the wide receiver 10. Through the first 5 weeks of the season, he was the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football.
Wow, really?
Right behind Adam Thielen was at 100 half PPR points, and Cooper Kupp with 90. You go just 1 week further, and he dropped all the way to 10. So that was when things started to shuffle around a little bit on the season. But the 5 weeks of the season, Cooper Kupp was the number 2 wide receiver. He showed flashes of being
a WR1.
A WR1. And I think that if, like, in that system, over the course of those weeks, because when you get to week 6, Robert Woods does leap over Cooper Kupp. And if I had to rank the Rams wide receivers, like if you put a knife to my neck and said rank them, I would take Robert Woods before Cooper Kupp. But, which is a change of heart, because I believe I would take Cooper Kupp over a couple months ago. But I think that when you look at Cooper Kupp and how effective he was and how good he was, I think maybe he even got hurt that week. Week 6, he had 1 fantasy point. He had 1 target in that game. So
he did get hurt.
The sample size is not that big, but when you look at the first 5 weeks of the season there, the fact that he was the number 2 wide receiver over those weeks is crazy. So for me, I look at Cooper Kupp. People are forgetting about those 5 weeks. They're forgetting about how good he was when he was on the field as a starting wide receiver. And he wasn't just like Jared Goff's safety valve. Like, he was Jared Goff's main target.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing is, like, as you know, you have Robert Woods. Now, there's not going to be a situation where 3 Rams wide receivers finish in the top 20 again. Like, that's not going to happen. But
No,
I
it probably
think that it probably won't. You were about to drop some hot takes, were you?
I was thinking about it.
He was thinking about it. But yeah, so I think for me, like, people are just completely forgetting about how good Cooper Kupp was over those 5 weeks, and I think it shows where he's getting drafted. And I think that if you're sitting in drafts and you're in the 6th round, 7th round, and Cooper Kupp is sitting there on the board, then you got to take him.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I don't think he's dropping.
I think
like
he's
7th,
5th right now.
I know. I did a draft the other day, just like to play around with other people, and I think it was ESPN. So take that as, with a grain of salt. But
Right.
I think I took him in the beginning of the 6th round, and he wasn't supposed to go there, but he fell because people just kept passing on Cooper Kupp and were taking other receivers.
Right.
They took Brandon Cooks was like in the 4th round. Robert Woods was in the 4th round, and Cooper Kupp just fell to my lap, and I wasn't even going to take him, but he just kept falling. So
Yeah.
in a lot of drafts, people do forget about Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. Let's move on to our last guy. This is a little bit of a I don't want to say a hot take, but it is a smidge of a hot take. I don't even know if I want to agree with it yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Should I get the oven ready?
Yeah, get the oven ready.
Is it hot? Is it gonna burn my hands?
Antonio Brown is our last
Ooh.
forgotten about wide receiver. I think this is more a talent thing than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I personally think, like, at first I was like, okay, Rams, like, the Raiders are where wide receivers kind of go to die. And I still kind of feel that way. But, and you also have to consider Amari Cooper, like how good he was when he left the Raiders system.
Yeah.
Like, there is a lot of nervousness. Like, I am avoiding drafting Antonio Brown unless I absolutely have to, and it hurts. But I think people are forgetting how talented this guy is and how good he is. He has been a top 3 wide receiver like the last 3 or 4 years, and that doesn't just change. Now, there's a lot of variables.
It could just change if you go to the Raiders.
Yes. I think the talent is there and the production is there. The problem with Antonio Brown is the fact that he's not going to get targeted nearly as much in the Raiders system as, I mean, who knows? Maybe he does get targeted an insane amount. But he's not going to get targeted I think last year he got targeted 170 times.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's going to reach 170 targets. I think he might hit 140 or 150, and at his, like, I think it was a 78% catch rate. Like, he'll pull down 100 to 110 catches. In a half PPR league, that's really good.
Yeah.
The big thing that I noticed when dissecting Antonio Brown's numbers is the fact that he is touchdown dependent. All he did with Oakland was catch touchdowns. He had 1,200 receiving yards last year, around that total. And that's good. That's really good for a wide receiver. But Juju had more receiving yards than him. Juju had less fantasy points than him. The only reason why Juju finished with less fantasy points than Antonio Brown last year is because Antonio Brown was the red zone target.
Did Antonio Brown play every game?
No, he didn't play week 15. I mean, week 17, I'm sorry. He took that week off.
So, well, that's a nice way of putting it. He took the week off.
At least it wasn't a fantasy championship week. So
does that count with the fantasy statistics you just said, though? Did that include week 17?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Juju played every game?
Juju played every game, yes.
All right.
He was the main receiver in one of them. I could be wrong about Antonio Brown missing one game, but I don't.
No, he did miss week 17.
Yeah, he missed week 17. I mean, like an extra game. I don't remember. But yeah, I think that when you look at those numbers, though, and even if you were to take away 1 week because Juju sucked in week 17, like, he was terrible. I don't think he caught a touchdown in that game. So I think my big thing is, like, when I look at Antonio Brown, is he going to produce the same amount of touchdowns that he did last year? That's the only.
That's a tough question.
That's the big thing. He's gonna get 100 catches. He's gonna get 1,200 yards. He's gonna pull that down. That's, you put that together in a half PPR setting. Just say he gets 110 receptions. That's what is that? 55 fantasy points in half PPR for receptions, and then it's 150. 1,200 for 120 for the 1,200 yards. So it's 175 fantasy points. So the question of whether, the difference between 175 and like 215, 220 is going to be, or 230 or 240 is going to be the touchdowns. Because right now, last year, the number 5 wide receiver, Julio Jones, had 269 fantasy points in half PPR.
200 and what?
69. Antonio Brown had 271 last year. Devontae Adams, 274. Hopkins, 276. And Tyreek Hill, 284. I say this with a grain of salt because I do believe Antonio Brown's getting forgotten about, and I think where he's getting drafted, which is sometimes early in the third round,
yeah,
he's still going to produce at a wide receiver 1 level. He's not going to produce at a top 5 level anymore. That's where I'm kind of going.
Okay.
5 to 10 is where he's going to finish this year, and that's kind of where I put him. I think he can finish with 240 to 250 fantasy points. It's just if he gets 1,200 yards, 100 plus catches, and pulls down his 15 touchdowns, he's Antonio Brown.
Well, right.
I don't think he's pulling down 15 touchdowns in the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, I don't think
the Oakland Raiders didn't score 15 freaking passing touchdowns all last year. I'd have to look that up, but I'm like,
yeah, barely.
It's just ridiculous. Like, that offense was not good last year. They were inconsistent with throwing the ball to Amari Cooper, so much so that he was people just dropped him on the waiver wire.
Don't at me.
Yeah. But it's like, if that happens to Antonio Brown, a lot of people are going to get burned drafting him in the 3rd round. So this is a hard one for me. Like, this is not I'm going to throw him as a forgotten wide receiver on this list. I think the talent is so much, he is so much more talented than Amari Cooper, and some people would disagree with that. You can take that hot take and shove it in the burners with Amari Cooper, but Antonio Brown is so much more
Amari
talented.
Cooper fan.
Yeah. And Antonio Brown is so much more talented than Amari Cooper and he's literally the option there. When Amari Cooper was there, he wasn't paid like Antonio Brown. He wasn't targeted they didn't treat him like Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's coming here. They know he's good. They know he's talented. John Gruden loves him. So they're going to target him. I don't see him not being targeted.
I think that might even force him the ball a lot.
Right. And if they do, if he reaches 180 targets, I think he finishes in the top 5. It's as simple as that for me. Right. He can produce. He's talented. He's got everything. It's just a matter of I think for me it's touchdowns. That's about it.
No, I don't disagree with that, and I don't think he's gonna get the touchdowns either, playing in Oakland. But I kind of just touched on this. Oakland knows Antonio Brown is Antonio Brown.
Right.
There's a reason they traded for him.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna want to use him. They're gonna use him a lot, and then you also have to take into account if you want to draft Antonio Brown.
Right.
Is Derek Carr good? Do you think Derek Carr is a good quarterback? Mm-hmm. Do you think the offensive line improved enough? Do you think the whole offense in general improved enough? Do you think the Raiders will be a good team? There's a lot of factors that you have to take in.
Right.
So I'm not necessarily saying draft Antonio Brown, but there are a lot of people. It's almost split down the middle. It's actually really 60-40 of people, and the 60 is saying, I'm not drafting Antonio Brown. He's on the Raiders.
I know a lot of fantasy football experts in the fantasy football community who are completely avoiding Antonio Brown.
Yeah, they will not draft him no matter what.
And I can see that. For me, like I said, before I even started with this conversation, I was I'm not drafting Antonio Brown. There are situations, if I'm at pick 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4, or 5, where I'm making a decision on Antonio Brown or AJ Green. And I'm having a hard time making that decision, going the Antonio Brown direction. The upside is there. The ceiling is there. The number 1 wide receiver potential is there. But who do I think is actually going to produce next year at a high level? Is a guy like Antonio Brown going to work in John Gruden's system? There's so many questions.
There are a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions surrounding a lot of these guys that we just listed. But I think that I just think a lot of people are forgetting how talented Antonio Brown was. They're just I don't like him because he's on the Raiders.
Would you take... So, I love AJ Green, but I'd take Antonio Brown over AJ Green, would you? If you're drafting right now?
I haven't decided yet. Ask me.
Okay. Wow, that's...
That shows you how close it is for a lot of people in the fantasy football community.
But I'm just taking guys that are in that range. Adam Thielen or Antonio Brown?
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown or Keenan Allen?
Antonio Brown.
T.Y. Hilton or Antonio Brown?
Antonio Brown.
You thought about that one?
No, I was just trying to think about his situation.
Mike Evans or Antonio Brown?
Mike Evans.
Okay, so you And then I know you have Juju because you love Juju, and then Odell. So
Love Juju.
okay, here's
number 4 wide receiver for me, baby.
I'm just very curious because I know you hate this player.
Yeah.
You're forced to draft one of these guys: Antonio Brown or Michael Thomas.
Michael Thomas.
Okay,
I do hate Michael Thomas though. So inconsistent.
I don't know. I mean, I get why, but
I just can't. Like he's like
I just-
a lot of people. He has the talent. It's just his quarterback is about as old as dirt.
wow, dissing
I
Drew
love you,
like
Drew
that.
Brees. I love you, but he's old as crap.
He is.
And Michael Thomas was very inconsistent last year. The Michael Thomas truthers will pull out the 2016. Yeah, no, stop it.
He was inconsistent last year.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
But when he was on, dude, he
was on. Yeah, he definitely has. He has that top end, top 3 wide receiver like
upside
written all over him. But so does Antonio Brown. I have to take Michael Thomas just because of
the value,
the situation, and the fact that he is like, even though his quarterback is old as dirt, he's in a situation that is much better than the one in
the Raiders.
Oakland. Yeah. But that'll do it for our Forgotten Wide Receivers episode of the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Be sure to listen on Thursday as we go into Forgotten Quarterbacks from 2018, 2017, whatever you want to say. It'll be an interesting show. You got any closing thoughts for us, boss?
You know, I think we're forgetting a very important wide receiver. N'Keal Harry, bro.
Yeah, right.
He's going in the 9th round, you know.
That's a little bit ridiculous.
It is.
Talk to you Thursday, Fantasy Champs.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.